told your friend you're not okay? And tell me what's wrong and why you never said you felt that way. And guess you're trying to stay strong and fake a smile until I look away. But I've known you too long, it hurts to watch your blue eyes fade to gray as you fade away, as you fade away.
Hey, we're back again to look at these wireless mics. This time I want to do a little comparison between the Rode Wireless Go 2 and the DJI mic, just more on the sound quality, because there's so many feature function videos out there already, and I'm sure that if you're interested in these mics, you can look at those and get all kinds of information. This is more just on the sound quality, and we'll do some comparisons. We'll do some without EQ initially, and just maybe a little normalization just to get the volume similar. And then maybe we'll look at it compared to a wired mic. For feature function type of stuff for these mics, there's so many videos out there. I'm not crazy about doing like comparisons, sound comparisons. There's so many variables in the transducers, right? Of course, a mic's a transducer, and so are speakers, and so are, the monitors and the headphones and the earbuds and all that. Because the transducers are different, of course, it's hard to really do a good comparison with the video. I'm just going to normalize them initially and not do much post-processing in a controlled environment in a studio. And I just want to see how the quality holds up, because I'm more interested in that with these mics, because they are an inexpensive solution for wireless mics, right, at a few $100s. The standard is this Rode Wireless Go 2 mic. So the DJI gets a lot of publicity, and there's also the Hollyland Lark 150. I may look at that too, and just try to see if we can get some sort of recordings that can give us some comparisons on the sound. I think they'll all do well. It's just a matter of each mic has a different characteristic. If you have headphones or monitors, that enhance the frequency response and give bass boost and things like that, it's kind of hard to compare. I'm not doing feature and function on these mics, but I have a few thoughts on them. I mean, the obvious thing, first of all, is that the Rode Wireless Go 2 is quite a bit larger than the DJI mic. We'll also probably look at the Hollyland Lark 150. I'm not sure if we want to do it on this video or not, but I want to at least compare a couple of the mics. I don't know how much of a negative it is, but people say that the Rode Wireless Go 2 is cumbersome because it has proprietary software that it uses. That could be. I've used it, and it's not too bad to work with, where the DJI is just a plug-and-play type of thing. It's much easier or much faster to get working. The other thing, too, that I noticed, again, I'm not going to get into feature and function stuff, but I noticed that with the DJI, you can adjust the gain of the transmitters, which you cannot do with the Rode Wireless Go 2. So that's something else. The other thing that you hear is that there's some radio interference in some cases with lavalier mics with the DJI wireless solution. I haven't tested that. It could be true. I'm sure it is, because videos talk about it. But I would imagine if you are going to use a lavalier mic with it, that you'll test that type of thing out to make sure that you don't have radio interference problems. In order to get a good comparison, I'm going to use the mics that come with these wireless solutions, in other words, the transmitters, and use their receivers, and their receivers will go into a Zoom F6 on 32 float. The Rode says it can export the sound, the audio, to 32-bit float. That may be true, but as I've read about this, both mics actually record in 24-bit mode. The Rode solution does not give you the advantage of the 32-bit float, which is like to prevent clipping sounds when you have a loud noise during the recording. The 32-bit float also will take a very small sound, a very small signal, and you'll be able to, in post-processing, get the signal back to a good level and clear it, a good clear level. And since the Rode advertises that you can export 32-bit, it does not actually record in 32-bit, so it really doesn't buy you anything there. I'm going to read some passages from a book and record them simultaneously into a Zoom F6. I'll do the recordings and only normalize them and have very little post-processing initially, and then I will go through some other post-processing. My advice is that when listening to the comparisons, to try to use gear that has the flattest frequency response as possible, something that doesn't enhance the bass and things of that nature. And then you'll get a true idea of the character of these mics. I mean, like someone said, every mic is different and sounds differently, and even people's voices will do better with different mics. So let's get started. I'm going to plug in the wireless receivers into the Zoom F6 and simultaneously read from a book some passages, and we'll listen to it with very little post-processing, just some normalization. The next day I went to the prison library to study, but I was disheartened when I found out that law books are long. Long books make me sleepy. A great lawyer must know his weaknesses, and I knew almost all of mine. I decided that instead of struggling through those books, I would rely on my vast knowledge of Ben Matlock's work. So Rocco and I began to practice courtroom scenarios in our small cell. I started by asking Rocco straight out if he was guilty of any of the 3 murders. The next day I went to the prison library to study, but I was disheartened when I found out that law books are long. Long books make me sleepy. A great lawyer must know his weaknesses, and I knew almost all of mine. I decided that instead of struggling through those books, I would rely on my vast knowledge of Ben Matlock's work. So Rocco and I began to practice courtroom scenarios in our small cell. I started by asking Rocco straight out if he was guilty of any of the 3 murders. The next day I went to the prison library to study, but I was disheartened when I found out that law books are long. Long books make me sleepy. A great lawyer must know his weaknesses, and I knew almost all of mine. I decided that instead of struggling through those books, I would rely on my vast knowledge of Ben Matlock's work. So Rocco and I began to practice courtroom scenarios in our small cell. I started by asking Rocco straight out if he was guilty of any of the 3 murders. So now we're going to go through and do just a little post-processing and just see if we can improve the sound a little bit. Okay, so we're just going to edit the Rode Wireless Go 2 audio file and just do a little post-processing, do a low-cut filter, compression, and then normalize it. We'll just do the one wave file for the Rode mic. I'll do the others off camera, and we'll compare the files that were just normalized to the ones that had some post-processing here using Audition, and we'll just see how they sound, see what the differences are. So this is the Rode Wireless Go 2 mic. Okay, and I'll select this preset, a low cut, reduce bass. I'm not going to reduce bass because I don't think these wireless mics need a reduction on the bass, that's for sure. I'm just going to do the low cut. Okay, then I'm going to match loudness. Instead of using a limiter, I'm going to match loudness on this. We'll go and this is a compression, a little gate, and I think that compression does nicely. For a YouTube video, I'm going to get it up closer. I'm going to go ahead and normalize further. I mean, this is pretty good right here, to be honest, but I'll go ahead and normalize it. I'll do it to -1.99, close enough. Okay, and just for laughs, let's just listen to it. The next day I went to the prison library to study, but I was disheartened when I found out that law books are long. Just to talk about some of this post-processing and get a little more detailed. In this case, I used a more conservative type of engineer's approach, looking at what Julian Krauss does. He talks about his voice audio conservative approach to post-processing, a more minimalist type of approach, and that's what I did here because I thought it would give us a little more consistency. In the description, I put a link to Julian's video on doing post-processing. I did it a little different, but I pretty much used his tactics. Instead of using a limiter, I like this match loudness type of approach, doing it early in the post-processing, and the order matters. Here's a few screenshots of what's behind the presets. Here's the low cut filter parameters. And all of these, depending on whatever tool you use, whether it be Audacity, Audition, or whatever, you can do all these things. But this is the low cut filter for all 3 mics. Then we matched loudness. And these are the parameters on the match loudness. So then we did a tube modeled compression. And these are the parameters for that. Then we did a final edit with some compression using the Reaper plugin with Audition. And these are the parameters within it. And normalized it to -1 dB. After this post-processing, I went into Audacity, and here's the three waveforms. Look how similar they are. And if you look at them closely, which I had to do, you'll see that they're all different. The idea was to have this controlled type environment and controlled type of editing. And so it looks, they look pretty close, and they're quite symmetrical. From here, I'm going to do a little comparison of sound quality with these wireless mics. So here's the comparisons. The next day I went to the prison library to study, but I was disheartened when I found out that law books are long. Long books make me sleepy. The next day I went to the prison library to study, but I was disheartened when I found out that law books are long. Long books make me sleepy. The next day I went to the prison library to study, but I was disheartened when I found out that law books are long. Long books make me sleepy. I think the wireless mics did well. I mean, the Rode has a little less bass to it, I think, but at the same time, there's more articulation, probably with voice, and that's why it's made that way. I mean, with my voice, that's what I'm hearing. There's a little more bass with the DJI. I hear it's not muddy. It's just a little more bassy than the Rode. For my voice, they both sound realistic to me. When I plug in the SE V7, I do find that you've got the bass and the clarity more so. It is a little different. I think it's pretty obvious. I think these SE Electronics mics are pretty good and probably underrated. There are many experts that are specialists in mics, and they recommend these SE mics. So this SE V7, I think, did quite well. I like it. And when I compare it to the wireless mics, I do hear a difference. I think it's considerably better. But from the standpoint of the convenience of the wireless mics, I think they do darn well, and my voice sounds realistic with them. So I would be happy to use either of these mics. And I think that if one listens to the recordings and hasn't decided and doesn't own either of the mics, whether it be the Rode or the DJI, that you probably can't go wrong with either one. I particularly like the DJI mic, but I don't dislike the Rode, and I really love the wired SE V7, obviously. I hope that was of help to you. Over and out.
I know you told your friend you're not okay, and tell me what's wrong and why you never said you felt that way.